Welcome to the Solar Astrology Podcast. Today's episode will be about the zodiac sign of Libra. We are recording this on October 21st, 2023, and we are thrilled to tell you more about the sign.
Yes, hello everyone. Amia here. And let's dive right into the basics of Libra being cardinal air. It's a young sign, and it's the second air sign we're going to meet, and the third cardinal sign we are meeting. Um, and in a way, it is also the first sign that we are meeting in opposition to one of the signs that we talked to about in the beginning, which is Aries. So that is also very interesting that we are having this combination for like the first time.
Yeah, it means we are halfway, by the way.
It means we're halfway, and that also means since Aries starts with the spring equinox, that also means that Libra is the start of the autumn equinox.
Yes, indeed. And, with all of the colors of the autumn, I'm not surprised that the sign is ruled by Venus, right? And it's also the exaltation of Saturn and the fall of the sun and the detriment of Mars. Because, if you think about autumn, it's the beginning of autumn, which means days are getting shorter. Light is decreasing, and we are now in the dark season of the year. And the leaves are becoming brownish, they are dying. That's why it's the exaltation of Saturn, because light decreases, nature starts to slowly die. But it's beautiful because of the balance of colors we have, and it's a balance between light and darkness, because it's the equinox, and the equinox is, you know it's a balance between light and darkness. So I love that Venus, it's ruled by Venus, and it's the exaltation of Saturn. Because of this reason, I think I always thought that it makes so much sense.
Yeah, in a way, it's like the decaying process that we meet in the autumn, and just like the other Venus sign, which is Taurus, that rules over the spring, which most people find some of the most beautiful time of the year. Most people also find the beginning of autumn the most beautiful time of the year.
Mhm.
So in a way, it's like springtime is what like life-giving quality, and now we have the beauty of like the decaying quality and things coming to an end. And again, as you said, it's the balance, and yet still it is getting darker. So like by the end of Libra season, it's already getting so dark. I mean, even just the
No.
past few weeks when I look outside and it's already dark at like 6 p.m. It's it came very fast. So it's you definitely feel that darkness is here, darkness is coming.
Yeah, and that is also why it's the sign of the fall of the sun.
Yes.
Like the sun is definitely not doing well in the sign. I mean, its light is decreasing. It's not the sun part of the year. It's not the young and light side of the year anymore. So the sun is doing very bad here. Makes so much sense, but and uh, if you think about also the polarity of Saturn and the sun, you you have Sun ruling Leo, well, Saturn ruling Aquarius, and it's obvious that they have a polarity, because the sun is the light and Saturn signs are in the darkness. So Saturn does well when the darkness begins, which is in Libra season. So the signs also contains the polarity between light and darkness, with the archetypal opposition of the sun and Saturn in this sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I think autumn also is very much associated with not just what we see outside, but mostly how we feel. Everything is starting to get more introverted. And now Libra is still like a young sign in that sense, but it is a darker young sign. So we still feel the introversion and like the oftentimes also like just the melancholy, which is so often associated with Saturn,
Yes,
that
indeed.
comes in. And I also think about the sun and how the sun has so much to do with like our purpose and where we're heading in life and like this golden path. And it's often just a time where this is not so present. It's a different season, and we're just getting prepared, and many people are feeling, you know, a bit lost, because it's more about reflection. It's not so much about, oh, this is my purpose and I'm going to go out and do this. No, it's like now, like we're slowly starting to rewind and see what happened and where we are heading, and preparing for this more introspective time of the year that is a bit of like the harsher part of the year. I mean, the darker autumn in itself is like the dark part of the dark half of the year. So it is very dark, if you want to put it that way. And I think it's more just sad, like societally, that we don't, like, we lost a lot of the maybe rituals and things that we used to do to celebrate this time of the year, because now it's almost as if we're doing the same thing throughout the whole year, when now we should be honoring a time that is more inwards. And I think many people have a problem with that, because they feel like, oh, I should be doing this whole thing all the time, and now I feel lost because I don't have a purpose. But maybe the purpose is to not really have a purpose at this moment.
Yeah, I do agree. And, you know, also to refer back to the dignities, it's the detriment of Mars, right? And the last night I was thinking, why is Libra the detriment of Mars if in Libra season nature begins to die like the leaves of the tree? I was like, it doesn't really make sense. But then I realized that, as you were saying, it's not a time of action. It's not a time where we have a purpose and we follow it. It's the fall of the sun, right? It means there is not a lot of action in Libra season. It's more introspective, as you said. I'm just repeating to make sense of what I'm saying next. And you know, Mars likes to do stuff. Mars like to have a direction and go get it. But it's not what's happening in Libra season. And also, if you want to divide a year in light and dark parts, the light will be the young part, the masculine one. And usually the masculine is defined by the presence of action. Whereas the yin side, so with the yin signs as well, it's defined by, it's called also feminine, and it's more passive in nature. That's what they were referring back to, you know, the temperament. If you think about the temperaments and stuff, they were saying yang is active, so it's masculine, feminine, it's passive. And we begin the yin side of the year, so Mars that loves action is in detriment, because we are getting in a part of the year where there's not much of action going on. So I really love that. I thought it was an interesting reflection to share.
Yes, and I also think what is very, very interesting, if we also go to the dignity scheme, is the fact that we have a benefic and a malefic planet doing very well in Libra. And no other sign has that. No other sign has a malefic and a benefic planet doing like really well there. And in Libra, we have the home sign of Venus, and then Saturn that is exalted. And I just think that is very interesting, and in a way also goes straight to the archetype of Libra, which is the scales. I mean, that is the symbol of Libra, and it's also the only sign that is an object. And yes.
Yeah, and you know, it's the scale of justice, right? And when I think about Venus and Saturn together in the sign of Libra, I think of greater justice. And I think it's a good word to describe the sun, the greater justice, because Saturn was also said to be the greatest malefic. And Venus is obviously about harmony and justice and peace. And the greater justice means that for the sake of being in harmony in a society, we we have to have some sort of justice in our life, but sometimes this justice means also suffering, right? You know, if somebody does something very bad, for example, in our society, it can either go to jail, but obviously this person is going to suffer in jail. It's not going to be happy. But this is done for the purpose of greater justice in this sense. And I think that that is why we need Saturn in the sign for the justice part. Because sometimes what is right or what is wrong, it's first of all difficult to determine, and Saturn brings a little bit of objectivity in helping us to determine what we consider right or wrong, even though it's not really black and white, of course. And it also brings a little bit the harshness, because sometimes what's correct is not what our heart wants.
Yes, and talking about heart, first of all, I mean, Venus has so much to do with, the values of our heart and everything, but also the fact that the whole like scales are very much associated with the myth and also the journey of through the underworld, where a soul has to pass the gates that Osiris guides, and in a way that's like the final judgment and decision-making process of the eternity of the afterlife. And Libra is very embedded in that archetype, and it's like and this is also where Saturn comes along, right? Because Saturn is about like the long-term aspect and what happens, before and after death. Because again, for a very, very long time, we only had the 7 inner planets. So Saturn did not only rule what was inside the boundaries, Saturn was also what was outside of the boundaries. So that's why Saturn is also associated with death and dying itself. And
yeah,
then
it's the keeper of the gate, right?
yes, exactly. So, and then one part of the judgment involves the weighing of the heart, where the heart, which is said to have contained like the whole record of all the actions in the life of the deceased soul, was weighed against a feather of the goddess Maat. And the feather was a symbol of truth and justice, which I also think is interesting since Libra is an air sign. It would make sense.
The feather
Exactly.
is definitely her.
Yeah, and that would determine whether the person has been virtuous or not. So if the heart was found to be heavier, it was fed to Amut, which was like the devourer, and the soul exactly, and it would be cast into darkness. And if the scales were balanced, the soul would have passed the final test, and it was taken before Osiris and welcomed into the afterlife. So I feel like so much of the Libran judgment is a way, and that is also why Saturn is so important in this equation. It's about maybe in the moment we don't know what the right thing is, but we can be sure that cosmically somehow things will balance itself out eventually. Like there will be some sort of final judgment that will come, and in a way that nobody can escape their fate and fortune, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. This is my favorite myth of Egyptian mythology, and I'm a Libra moon myself, and I've always felt a deep connection with this myth, and it's not surprising at all. And as you all said, the heart, the soul was weighted, and it's just so beautiful that it's a judgment of your action when you were alive, and justice is put as the principal thing, the most important thing, justice. And if you were not, if you were not virtuous enough, if you didn't live a life for justice, and you were devoured. And for the Egyptian, this meant that your soul was destroyed. It was not eternal anymore. Okay, so that was the real death for the Egyptian. Being that much disconnected from justice that your soul, that your soul dies. That was the Egyptian myth. And if the test was passed, then your soul would have lived eternally, you know. And I do agree. I think it's all about Saturn, you know. Did you pass the Saturn check or not? And it is, I don't know, it's just so beautiful. I didn't really have a point to this, but yeah, it's no, it just excites me, this myth. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I really, really love the myth as well. And also that in a way it's like um uh, like often people times say like, oh, only God can judge me. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's exactly that, but like it goes in that direction of like and this is where the Venusian part comes, is like at the end of the day, like, have you been virtuous in accordance to your true heart's values? Because it's like only you know that. And I think in a way it's also just very archetypal. When I think about Libra, I think it's a lot of the times of like, okay, well, if I lie on my deathbed, like, will I feel like I'm being devoured because I've made all the choices against, the virtues that I truly believe in? Or will I be able to lie there and be like, oh yes, I lived life according to my values and I'm able to go in a peaceful way. So it's so much about I mean, in itself anyways, about the decisions that we make, which we haven't talked yet so much about, but like decisions and choices. But so much of it is like, what are the long-term implications of the decisions and the choices that we make?
Yeah, definitely. And the Saturn part is really important in the choices here, because there is the stereotype that Libra are indecisive people, which is true to certain extents. But if you think about it, Libra is not indecisive because it doesn't know what it wants. I mean, it is true. It sometimes Libra doesn't know what it wants, but it's because of a precise reason. It's because Libra gets stuck into that part in which it's trying to decide every possible scenario. I mean, it's analyzing every possible scenario and it's trying to decide which one to choose, which one is the best, which one is the most convenient. So Libra has in itself an intricate analytic quality due to Saturn, and try to weigh the pro and cons of everything. And this sometimes can make the decisional process a little bit slow. It is a fact, and Saturn is also slow, archetypally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saturn tends to slow down. And so Libra, it's not true that Libra doesn't know what it wants. It's just that Libra needs time to weigh and decide, to weigh, judge, and decide. That's why we have the scale. That's why justice is so important for the sign. It's the Saturn part. And Venus, obviously, because Venus wants good. It's greater good, it's greater justice.
Yeah, and it's also about like the weight and the responsibility that the decisions that we make carry. So Libra knows that and is very aware of that. And it's almost sometimes a bit of a burden, or it can feel like a burden to, make a choice that they know, okay, it might upset some people. It might shake up some things. And it takes a lot of courage to take responsibility for making choices. So they want to be very sure that once they do make a choice, things have, the possibility to really get sorted out and lead to the possible best outcome for as much as it can, for everyone involved. So that
Yeah.
also comes up play.
Yeah, and also if we think about that, Mars is in detriment. Gosh, as a Libra moon, I know this myself. It's that sometimes for Libra, it's also hard to make a decision because you don't want people to suffer. Sometimes you know deep in your heart what is the right thing to do, but it's part of the Libra journey, learning that sometimes our decision causes suffering, but sometimes it's also right. And it has it's part of growing some sort of courage in this way, because Mars doesn't do well. So we have a little bit of lack of courage in this sense, and in saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and my heart will cry because I don't want people to suffer in general, but this is for the sake of justice. And when Libra doesn't have the courage of doing that, it tends to avoid the decision making process. It avoids, and it's rather avoidant, as an archetype, tends to avoid rather than hurt somebody. So I think this is a little bit the downside of Libra. It's a detriment of Mars. That's its downside, because sometimes it is really hard for Libra finding that courage. And since Libra is aware of not every, but it's aware of so many possible scenarios, it's harder. Because if Libra wasn't aware of every possible scenario, it would have been way more easy. But since Libra is aware, and it's aware of the consequences of their actions so much, they can be hyper aware, and this can make things difficult when you want to do something that maybe doesn't make someone else happy.
Yeah, and especially because also Venus and Saturn together have so much to do with like our social structures, like as a society, and like
Yeah.
the things we do, and like kind of the cues and how we form relationships and bonds. And people really knows how to do that very well. They kind of know what to say and what to do to be likable, and the downside can just sometimes be that, first of all, it just leads to ignoring your actual values in something and doing something for the sake of just being appeasing and appealing. And
Mm-hmm.
then, secondly of all, it can almost turn in a way like manipulative, where you are doing things for like the benefit, or like because you are aware of the social cues, it can kind of trick other people into doing things they're avoiding to do. So
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh, like I'm gonna make this person make the decision for me, so I don't have to take the responsibility for making the decision. So I don't have any part in this. So that can sometimes be the downside of Libra. Just like every sign has its downsides.
Yeah.
Yeah, Libra at its worst at times in this way. And obviously therefore also sometimes the stereotype that gets ascribed to us superficial, um which again is not per se true, but like all stereotypes have their roots in some form of truth. And for Libra, it has to do with the societal structures
Mm-hmm.
and knowing kind of what to do to be liked. um
Yeah.
So that's why it can come across as superficial.
Yes, indeed. The Venus part, I mean, we've talked so much about the Saturn part, but
Yeah.
talking more talking more about the Venus part, this is really it. But Venus wants to be liked, and Venus wants to be in harmony. And they have this great resource of knowing the social structures so well, because it's Libra and Saturn. And so sometimes it can be opportunistic for their own peace, for their own sake and interests. And it's like as if you are navigating a sea that you know perfectly. And sometimes it feels like lots of people are unaware of social structures. Some people with not so many Libra placements. And for Libra, then it becomes very easy to understand how to make connection that can be useful in the future for your future career or for your future interests. And so Yeah, Libra
So
can also,
sometimes Libra can be selfish. Let's just put
yeah,
it that way.
yeah, sometimes it can be selfish. Sometimes Libra can have a group of friends for hanging out and actually not having a friend that they are deeply connected with because they want the social interaction, they want to feel a part of a bigger group of people, and then they just take advantage of it. And it's not obviously all of the Libra do that, but it's a part of the Libra archetype. And I'm sure that most of Libra placement had to go through this journey into understanding, am I being with these people because I genuinely love being with them, or just because it's good for my social status, or so then I feel like I have connections and that's what matters in the end of the day. This is a this is a Libra journey as well.
Yes, and also Venus Saturn is associated with like famed appearances. So sometimes it is also people that um get into like a marriage, like that would be very Venusian, for the sake of just having a marriage and having like some sort of security and stuff like that. Um, so like from the outside, or there's people that from the outside they look like very put together and like some sort of way, but then like once you would visit their home and like spend more time with them, you would realize, oh, it's actually very chaotic. Like they don't even like really know each other. Like, okay, wait, they don't even really talk to each other. Like, what is going on? That type of thing, which sometimes can happen just with Venus, Saturn in general in a combination. Um, Although that would be a bit more of the downside. The upside of this combination would have more to do with love and relationships that are genuinely long lasting and that have a very deep bond, and people that stay with you through many phases of your life. And yeah, you get to like kind of grow with them.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And it's why does that happen? Why in the Libra journey, Libra feels the need of being in a social group, and sometimes it rather put first being in a social group than rather forming genuine connection. It's because Libra also is, rules over mm, rules over the cosmos, is the peace and harmony of the cosmos, because the cosmos is beautiful and has a structure, and this is harmony. And in fact, the word cosmetic, as if for makeup or beauty, it contains the word cosmos, and it's really Venusian in itself. And so Libra is kind of, you know, especially if we take Libra sun, because the sun is a guiding light. It's the demon. It's what guides us through life. And sometimes the solar mission of Libra suns, especially, it's to seek this greater ordered harmony that is the cosmos. So they feel the need of being placed in a structured order with harmony, and it's natural for Libra. It is. It is indeed very natural for Libra being in that situation because of this need. And, then obviously, as we said, the genuine connection, the deep connection, it's what matters. And it's part of its journey to figure that out and build this harmony and peaceful order structure with somebody they really love, and not with somebody just to have the structure.
Definitely. And with the order of the cosmos, in a way it is, because it is orderly, because even if it sometimes feels chaotic, I mean, even especially now, like we're in midst of eclipse season, it feels very chaotic.
It does.
It almost feels like and that is like a privilege to, because we have studied this language and we can kind of see it.
The language of astrology.
Exactly, the language of the stars. It's like, in a way, this almost creates like some sort of justice, because what is beautiful is just, because it's like it evens itself out. It's like the transits, like they become balanced all the time over again. They're just doing their thing. And
Cosmic balance.
yeah, it is in a way a cosmic balance that is constantly happening. So that's why being connected to that, and being connected to the information, which would be like the intellectual Aries side of Libra, which makes it, I mean, for me, I'm sure for both of us, that's what actually makes astrology so beautiful, because it feels like when I'm going through something, when I'm going through a transit and I can connect it to the cosmos, it almost feels more beautiful going through it, no matter if it's maybe hard or super nice. It feels like it has a purpose and like an order in
Yeah,
this whole thing.
indeed, indeed. And something personal, but it's rather funny. I think I already told it during the Aries episode. My boyfriend is an Aries moon, okay? And it kind of has learned astrology from me passively. And, sometimes I live by certain transits and I just tell him what they all mean. And he's already more practical and is asking me, yeah, how do we do to avoid certain things? What do we do to, prevent certain things to happen, or, use the most out of it? And I'm like, isn't it just beautiful to live by the fate and, living the experience of the fact that there is a cosmic order that is organizing things for us. And this is also a little bit of a Libra Aries opposition, because here, even though they are both young sign, we can really see that when Libra sees an order, Libra sees beauty into that. That's also, I'm into science. It's not surprising because I see the order of biology, in my case, and science, and I see beauty into that. Like, I'm just mind blown the more I study about astrology, about biology, that there is a fucking order, and it's incredible because it feels like there is an intelligence behind both life and astrology and the cosmos, and it's just beautiful, and it just fills my heart, because that's what's a Libra archetype, seeing the beauty of the ordered cosmos. It makes you connected with a sort of harmony. And it's also the beauty of makeup, if you want to see it that way. But when you do makeup, you have to balance light and darkness with shadows. And and that's also a Libra thing. It's not surprising that many Libra archetypes are into makeup, because when you start getting into makeup, it's a lot about balancing things with one product or the other. And yes, it can come up as superficial because it's a classical stereotypes, you can be, oh, it's always into makeup, that's just too superficial. But no, because when you're doing makeup, you're just balancing things. You're just playing with light and shadow. And it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's like the ritualistic part more of the process of beautifying yourself.
Yeah,
and to briefly bring it back to like astrology and the cosmos, which again, it just feels like, for me at least, I feel like in one way you could either get completely crushed by knowing that the planets are just going on in eternal cycles all the time. And it feels like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this information? But for me, actually, that is beautiful. Like I feel like that is so nice to know that somehow everything is bound to just repeat itself.
Yeah. And to
and then we can
balance
never,
out.
yeah, and exactly, to balance itself out. And at the end of the day, it never repeats like exactly the same way. And also, right, it's like so easier to follow the transits. And what I also really think is interesting, um and also why, Libra justice and like is associated with courtrooms. Well, just when I think about transits, like, okay, we're like this summer we had a Venus retrograde transit. I'm like, okay, um at this day that Venus went retrograde, this thing happens. So because I know that, I'm going to be very aware and look out for when Venus crosses this points again. And I know that this thing will most likely be this amount of weeks or months that is going on. So for me, um, how could I want to rush something, which is like, the Saturn process of like, well, the information is going to get revealed when the time is right. And it's in a way the same with the patience that you need when you are in a courtroom or in a judgment room. You, if you are a good judge, you don't want to immediately jump to conclusions. You want to be like, I need to hear everyone's perspective. I need to hear what everyone's got to say. Maybe, like this case will take
Yeah,
6 months. Who knows? But
it's
like,
so Libra.
exactly. But we have to be like steady and let things reveal itself when the time is right. And so much of that is also being aware of the transits. And I mean, honestly, I don't even know how to how I would live or navigate my life in any other way. I feel like it would be so harsh if I didn't know that, because now I'm like I'm not so like impatient when something happens, because I'm like, oh, okay, no, like, okay, maybe the retrograde is coming now. So this is a story arc that goes on for this long. So now I kind of got to chill about it and see what comes next.
Yeah, it's I love how you put it. And it's again what you said about the cycles that are inevitable and the time that it takes. That Saturn is the time part, of course. And the fact that, also if you look at history, the cycle and the story that they repeat themselves, but they are always different. They are not exactly the same. And it's the balance part, it's the scale part. Things happen and they balance out. We go from one extreme to the other, things are balanced, and then something else break the balance and creates a new scenario. And it's just so beautiful. It's still tied with the symbol of the scale. And also something I don't think we said it. If you said it, I'm just so sorry, is that Libra is one of the non-humane sign. I mean, sorry, non-bestial sign. It's an object. You said it. It's an object, and it's not an animal like Taurus or Sagittarius, which is a bestial sign, or Leo, and it's because it's really tied with the intellect of weighing and balancing and pondering stuff that we can do with intellect. And I mean, obviously, all of the air sign are related to the intellect, but yeah, Libra is really about this process of weighing things and pondering, and it is just so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a way, like the object, it is the most objective sign.
Yeah, that is also true. It's really like there is a part of objectivity, sorry.
Totally.
Objection.
So we need an archetype for everything. So Libra is the archetype of that.
Yeah, because you want to see objective facts and objective data before analyzing and coming up to a conclusion. And you need all of them. You cannot discard some of them according to your own pleasure, you know?
Okay, so now we are gonna move into the comparisons of the other signs with Libra to give it a bit more flavor.
Yes, indeed. And we mentioned some stuff already, but the first comparison will be about Libra and Aries. It's opposite sign, and of course we talked about this in the Aries episode, but we will briefly repeat it. They are their qualities. And I would say kindness versus recklessness. It's Mars and Venus, right? So Venus would be the kindness and Mars the recklessness. And Libra is also very people oriented, thinking about good, the greater good, as we extensively repeated in this episode. And Aries sometimes it's very self-centered in the action they make. They just follow the impulse they are feeling and they do it. And sometimes people can be a little bit offended sometimes because they can perceive certain behavior of Aries like rude or unpolite, which is completely the opposite of Libra. Libra will almost never come out as rude or unpolite. It will be Libra is kind of always formal, and it cares a lot about being polite and educated. And when I think about Libra and Aries, I think of the song called Psycho Killer, which at certain point says, I hate when people are not polite. And then it goes, Psycho Killer.
Yeah.
And whatever. And I think as a Libra moon, I really do feel that, especially with Aries moon, because Libra gets so much triggered when somebody is not polite. And that is why Libra and Aries are really a strong position, I would say, because they are really, really opposite. I mean, all of the opposite are opposite, but Libra and Aries are really different in this sense.
Yeah, it's almost like the most opposing opposition.
Yeah.
And that is interesting because in a way, and that is just coming to my mind right now, because the opposition aspect is ruled by Saturn.
Yeah.
And you have like a exalted Saturn versus a Saturn in its fall. So that makes them very different, just per se. And I feel like Aries is much more about, or so much about, the power of the now moment, and doing things in the moment, and in that sense maybe being a bit self-centered, because you kind of have to be. And Libra is much more about long-term decisions and more careful weighing.
Yeah,
and yet obviously still both can learn from each other, because it's not like one is the better or the worst. Again, so much is more about the timing and the cycles of things, because even now, currently, we have the eclipses, right? And we kind of went into another or a new cycle when the nodes moved into Aries and Libra. So it feels like an axis that is just very, very present in the society and the human consciousness right now, if you want to put it that way. And it's even more fascinating because the North Node is in Aries and the South Node is in Libra. And we prescribe to the ancient way how people viewed the nodes, so not the evolutionary way.
Yep.
So in that way, with the North Node in Aries, we can just see like a much more heightened how do you say, like, urge of like, I need to do this for myself, and like I need to stand up for myself, and like I need to do it now. And potentially like it like kind of being a bit too explosive or even detrimental, like completely just overworking oneself. It's like it's intense Mars energy. And then in Libra, with the South Node in Libra, it's much more about like, oh, like where do I really need to set my boundaries so I don't constantly get like into these conflicts again, or like the relationships again that are just harming for myself, and how can I be much more true to my values and things that I really care about. Like how can I bring that forth, and how can I take responsibility for my decisions and choices? I mean, we just had the eclipse in Libra last week, and I feel like so many people have just kind of been, kind of put on the spot of like, you kind of have to make a decision now.
Yeah,
um
indeed. Like, do you
uh,
want to think about your own well-being or the well-being of others and self-sacrifice? It's such a team, I would say.
yes,
Such a
yes.
team right now.
Yeah, and you can't avoid it because it's like not participating or not making a decision is still making a decision. That's like the discrepancy that we have to
Exactly.
face.
Not deciding is deciding.
Exactly. So yeah, Libra Aries very much in the air right now.
Yeah. And if you want to move to Libra Taurus comparison,
Yes.
the signs are indeed in aversion, but they are both Venus ruled. And I don't think we will spend so much time into this because we did this comparison already during the Taurus episode. And for those who didn't listen to the episode,
Go listen to the episode.
go listen to the episode. Bye. No, I'm kidding. Libra is being an air sign is way more intellectual and abstract. And Taurus is being an earth sign, it's more connected to the physical pleasures like food and what feels good in the body, maybe sex, maybe the booze, and and it's I would say that a good keyword could be the beauty of the senses versus the intellectual beauty. And also abstract art can be something that Libra could appreciate, and Taurus would be like, no, I don't see beauty into it. I want the practical stuff, um like
It almost feels like Taurus would much more enjoy like somebody that formed a sculpture with their hands and
exactly.
and did something like that, whereas Libra is like, oh yeah, that is
Modern
so, I
art.
mean, Libra is like poetry, like the written words and the beauty of the words, and that you can take it in. Like poetry is so much more on the Libra side of again, intellectual beauty versus the senses, which is more in the Taurus
I do
side.
agree.
Like Taurus would much more enjoy being in nature and seeing the flower, and Libra would much rather read a poem about the flower.
Yeah, that is true indeed. It's a good example. And interestingly, another comparison that I really like a lot, because I think that took me so much time to understand this comparison, also because I'm a Capricorn sun, is the difference between Capricorn and Libra. I would say these sides are both very strategically. They are both strategic, sorry, but Libra is more strategic in a social way, and Libra knows how to move itself in the society scheme. And Capricorn also knows that because Capricorn is really driven to reach whatever they want to reach. But it's more objectively strategic because it's more result oriented. So they don't really care about the people, so the social part. They want to use the social part just as much as necessary to get where they want to be. Whereas the Libra can be way more concerned about what other people think and the support of other people, even though this might not be necessary, you know? And definitely the Saturn component makes them so much focused on the long term, and they have a sense of responsibility that sometimes can be out to carry. But the choices that a Libra makes in their life can be more about what makes me happy, what will bring greater happiness to me or society or my group. Whereas Capricorn is like more concerned about the choices that will grant them more stability and objective advantages. And we can also call it like social security versus material security, because the Libra part is, wants to feel safe in a group of people. So it will care more about the safety, emotional stability of, the group. And Capricorn is more about the material stability. Capricorn is way more hyper aware of, the importance of our material resources, because Capricorn acknowledges that without the material resources, everything will fuck up, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it feels like the long-term dream of Libra would be to, have a nice house with the people around them, and really like the connections making life worthwhile. Like they would really want to have these long-term connections that will be by them for the rest of their life, and that's kind of what they're aiming for. Cooking soups for your best friend even 50 years later.
Yeah, indeed,
And
indeed.
then Capricorn is much more about like, oh yes, I want to leave, I want to work hard for this house so I can leave them the house
Yeah,
once I'm not
indeed.
here anymore.
Indeed,
So
indeed.
it's much more about that. And it is interesting also because, right, both have a strong Saturn influence. But then what Capricorn has with Libra doesn't is a strong Mars. I mean, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So
Exactly.
it's much more like
Result
really getting into the trenches and doing the actions, which Libra is not so much about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Libra sometimes can talk about what they wish or what they think it would be the best and ethical choice, and Capricorn is like, okay, let's actualize that. And this, I think, it's a evergreen comparison that we can make for all of the air and earth sign. And we didn't talk about that, but Libra sometimes is way too much of an idealist. You create ideas in your mind of people or actions that are not necessarily true to the reality. And Capricorn is not, it's like, okay, let's see that objectively.
Yeah, Capricorn is way more in tune about like
Objectivity.
the and just like the harshness of like human conditions. I mean, that's why it needs Saturn and Mars there.
Yeah, indeed.
um
Yeah, Libra is
yes.
not so good with the harsh part of the reality for the detriment of Mars.
Yeah, not so much. Libra is, in a sense, a very ideal sign, which also has so much to do with justice because, right, we have an ideal view of what we think is
Yeah,
just in this world. But the
but
thing
it's
is, many people have different opinions and ideas, and that can also sometimes be a bit of a downfall of Libra, that it just cannot bear the fact that there is not a perfection that can be achieved.
yeah,
That humans are kind of just
humans.
messy,
Yeah,
and that decision making can be a very messy process, but we still need to make them.
yeah, exactly. And Capricorn is very good in being more objective in this sense and saying, okay, this is not ideal at all. It sucks. It's cruel and raw and heavy, and that's the way reality is.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, Capricorn is the first sign that is like, y'all don't want to do it, okay, I will go down in the trenches, like I'll do it, like
yeah, indeed.
I'll take the burden, I'll take the responsibility.
Yeah, whereas then we have the comparison between Cancer and Libra, and
Yes, which is the other, we're comparing the cardinal signs. I think we didn't
yes,
mention that.
yeah, it wasn't explicitated, but we are
Exactly.
comparing the cardinal signs. And Cancer, what I have in common is that both Cancer and Libra, they are very concerned about their group, but in Cancer it's more about their family and what Cancer consider to be family. So it's very close and intimate group, whereas Libra cares more about the group. It doesn't have to be intimate at all. You just have to feel like it's their group. But both of them, I would say, they have an intrinsic kind nature, and they tend to avoid conflicts if they can. I think Libra can avoid conflicts more than Cancer, because Cancer sometimes tries to avoid conflicts but then comes out as passive aggressive. So it's not really avoiding conflict in this sense, because you're still showing to the other person that you're pissed off. But yeah, generally they don't do good in arguments and discussion, and they prefer avoid that. And it does make sense, right? Cancer is the fall of Mars, and Libra is the detriment of Mars. So both of these signs very conflict avoidant.
Yeah, they kind of, yeah, because that's what they have in common. They don't really have other planets in common in that sense, because Venus, Libra is like Venus, Saturn, and then Cancer is Jupiter and the Moon. But what they do have in common is that Mars is not doing very well there.
Yeah.
So yes, that is exactly why they have that in common. And also oftentimes they kind of both have a tendency to put others before themselves.
Yeah.
To mostly avoid conflict. That is true. Or they just, and it's not necessarily that they don't have conflict, but just it's hard for them to have it. And they play in very different ways because Mars is not doing so well there. So they need, both of them can profit by learning better strategies to be in conflict, because it can be a very healthy thing. It can lead to a lot of growth and actually deeper connections.
True connection indeed. We have to address our conflicts. And sorry, but something else they do have in common is that both of the signs are ruled by the goddesses, which is Venus.
That is true, yeah.
Venus and the Moon, that they are the only basically feminine planets. Mercury doesn't really count.
Yes.
It can be either one or the other. It's the non-binary planet. But in Cancer, it's more of a moon care type. So it's more about, once again, directed towards the family and the nucleus, which makes so much sense because the moon is the greater archetype of the mother. Whereas Libra is more concerned about their group and the harmony between their group, and it's more the maid, right? It's more the maid versus the mother. So I really love that, and then they have the detriment and fall of Mars in common. I think that we like to stress out the dignities that signs have in common, because they make the whole astrological scheme so beautiful and poetical. And it's very nice to see the patterns that the signs have in common related to the essential dignity, because astrology is something that Libra appreciates so much because it's so ordered. Isn't that beautiful, right?
Yes. And while we are doing the series about the zodiac signs, actually the planets are really what give the zodiac signs the flavor, and that's why we constantly come back to the dignity scheme, because that is kind of what makes the sign the sign and the archetype and everything. It's really much more about when you know the planets that you can get to know the sign, and not really the other way around, even though we both learned it the other way around. But it really started to make so much more sense, for me at least. I'm sure for you too.
When, no need to say.
Yeah, exactly. When you really got to know I feel like when I really got to know the planets, I understood the zodiac signs much better. That's why we also mentioned it in the comparisons, because for us is like, that's where the logic comes in. That's where you're like, oh, this is why they are in common, or this is why Libra is like that, because otherwise you don't really have a good basis to explain why the zodiacs are the way they are.
Yes,
You're like, well,
indeed.
why is Libra ruled by Venus and Saturn is doing well there? Like, why? So we're giving you the
The
answers.
reason, exactly. And I think that our zodiac sign episode are really good for this reason. They might not be so good for someone who doesn't know anything about astrology and the zodiac sign meaning, but it can be very good if somebody knows the meaning of the sign and they want to understand why they have this meaning. I think that is the kind of the mission of this
It is
science
kind of the
episode.
mission.
It is kind of, and yeah, if we want also to compare the air sign right now, um, we have, well, Libra and Gemini, and since Amia is a lovely Gemini moon, but please let's talk about our differences in our moon positions.
Yeah. We have both our moon signs here.
And at 16 degrees, by the way. So
Yes. They're very much in trine.
yeah, very much in trine.
Um, so here you have I mean, both are, I mean, all the air signs have to do with like the intellect and communication and how we are in relationships with other people through that. So it feels like Libra, in a way, is much more structured,
Mhm.
whereas Gemini brings much more of like curiosity. And that is also because, once again, Gemini is ruled by Mercury.
Yeah,
And
it's a free
Mercury,
spirit.
yeah, Mercury is a very like free-spirited trickster planet that is just curious about the world and wants to know things and likes to just ask the question without, it's not so important what the answer is. The important part is like the question. um and so in a way, both of them with like, the indecisiveness. Gemini can also be a bit indecisive in that way, but it comes from a different part. We already talked extensively about Libra, but for Gemini it can be much more about like, I want to learn so much and I don't have, for Gemini, it's like, I would love to read all the books on this earth. And I'm so sad that I can't do that in my lifetime. And that I can't do like this hobby and do this school and that school all at the same time. So it's, yeah, I feel like the Gemini, like a phrase that I always just like to remind myself to is so much of like, you can do it all, but you can't do it at the same time. You can't do it
Yeah,
all at once.
yeah, indeed.
You can't do it all, and you got to start somewhere.
And Libra is way more okay, but let's just pick one topic. Let's just study it very deeply with
Yes.
structure and you know, let's just do that with so much structure. And also I think that with Libra as an idea can be a little bit more without saying a little bit, it can be more methodical and um you know, kind of following, and it's less ADHD, okay? In simple words, it's like, okay, I have this idea, let's follow this idea, let's explore the advantages and the pitfalls of this idea. Why could it work? Why could it not work? And why, or even more existential, it's like, why did I even think about that? Whereas Gemini is
Yes.
just leaving with the idea. And Libra is way more about analyzing the idea and see how it could work and how it could not work. It's the pondering element of Libra that comes out.
Yes.
And yeah, but I would also say that sometimes, without saying sometimes, Libra is more connected with the ethical choices that we make. It's more connected with, what's ethical and what's not. And Gemini being ruled by Mercury, which is the trickster, it's Gemini is not concerned about that.
Yeah.
Gemini sometimes loves to mess around and does not care if society accept it or not, and the society think it's good or wrong, whereas Libra is really, really in touch with that, and it's concerned, it's way more concerned about
Yes.
society's opinion and other people's opinion in general. So there is more caution in Libra, I would say. It's Saturn, right? It's caution. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
Gemini
Gemini.
doesn't have caution.
Yeah, Gemini is much more of a seeker of experience. So while Gemini could very well also be somebody that is like, I will marry somebody, but it's much more for like the sake of the experience and like
Yeah,
experiencing it. It's like I would wonder what I would be like if I would marry someone just for the sake of marrying them and advancing socially. Like, how would that feel like? How would I change? It would be much more in a playful way of
yeah,
getting into certain roles, where Libra is much more like planned out and concerned of the implications that might take on them.
yeah,
So that is, but both are very socially advantageous in that sense, that both know the social cues. I mean, Gemini is a very like good intellectual sign, and while it can be a bit tricksterish, like they both know how to interact well with people and the things to say and how to hold up a conversation and make conversations interesting. That's
mm-hmm.
what they kind of really both have in common, and could also in a way both lead to them having a bit more surface level interactions with people, because they are much more concerned about that. Like, I oftentimes both could be people that have large friend groups, but then they don't feel like they have people that they're actually like super close with. Like, it feels like they could share a lot but still not really say anything about themselves, that type of thing,
Yeah.
when they're out.
And there is also a classification among the planet of planets that are more connected with the youth and planets that are way more connected with the elderly. And both Mercury and Venus are more on the young side. Sun and Venus are kind of in the middle. And then we have Jupiter and Saturn, of course. Also, Mars is a little bit in the middle. Jupiter and Saturn are more in the elderly part. And with Libra, we can still see some youthness with the social flow that Venus gives to Libra. But then it's a little bit more older in the sense, whereas as we explored in the Gemini episode, Gemini has way more that childlike, not childish, but childlike playfulness into that, into itself, So yeah, and it also makes sense because Gemini season is during the spring when everything just began, when the zodiac season just began. So it's more playful, like a child's exploring, experimenting nature. And in Libra, we are in the fall season, we are in autumn, so there is a more mature quality, I would say, into that. Yeah, it's really beautiful, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, but then we have Aquarius,
Yes.
which is just Saturn, so it's definitely older than
Definitely, yeah.
Libra. Yeah, and
Yeah, we wrote in our notes, Aquarius is Libra without Venus.
yeah, and it's just a shortcut just to say that yes, um, Aquarius doesn't really care about the what society thinks. Instead, Saturn was also said to represent the outcast. And we can see that in Aquarius perfectly, because Saturn doesn't care if society approves it or not. And sometimes, especially during the young age, Aquarius tries to be the one against society, the 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 rebellion, and yeah, the outcast, and giving voice to the outcast. And sometimes Aquarius is such an idealist as Libra, but they rather prefer their intellectual honesty rather than faking it for the sake of social costumes. So they put their intellectual honesty first. Doesn't matter if it hurts somebody or if they have the whole room against them. They don't care at all. And what I really like about the combination of Libra and Aquarius is that um, Aquarius can teach to Libra that it's okay to transgress, because at the end of the day, what is good and what is wrong, um, it's just a human construct, what is good and what is bad. And you can transgress that. You can be less rigid and experiment things that are not accepted, because social costumes don't dictate what is really true or wrong, like what is really good or wrong. And Libra can teach some more manners, and can show maybe to Aquarius the beauty of the social construct and why they are in the way they are. And there is some utility into that. And yeah, I think they are really complementary in this sense.
Yeah, it's like both of them have a hard time being human for different reasons. Libra has more of a hard time because it's like because it just can't be this perfect human being. And Aquarius is just like, what even is a human being? Like, what do I do with this body? Like, what do I do with this vessel? Like, I have to like go out and do a job. Like, what? And it's still so funny because Aquarius is a fixed sign and it's ruled by Saturn. So they do have their structures, like they're just different structures than the normative structures. So while they most certainly do what Libra does too, they're just like, I will do it in a bit of a different way. It's usually the people that are, have relationships in very unconventional ways, or have families in very unconventional ways, or are like, I'm going to talk about this thing in this way, or use different terms to describe something because I don't like the way society uses that. So it's definitely both are social, just in different ways and perhaps in a bit of different groups.
Yeah. And also, if you think about Aquarius, it's ruled by Saturn, and in the Chaldean order, Saturn is, the last position. Saturn, as we said, is the gatekeeper, okay? And basically Saturn is the last in the Chaldean order because it's the slowest, and it's the one that is most far away from Earth and the other planets, which means that if you are more far away from them, you can see more the objective facts, and therefore you have a view of the collective, and you can make a critical analysis of that. So it means that even though societies as social costumes, Aquarius can be like, okay, but I don't think this is functional. So it's my job to see things we could improve and how we could improve them, because it doesn't mean that if everyone agrees it's the best choice. I think when I was uh, still at middle school or stuff, before high school, I had this teacher, and I think he had so much Aquarius planets. It was a music teacher, okay? And he was constantly saying to us, it doesn't mean that if an artist has so many likes that he's talented. Talent doesn't mean that it is appreciated by the mass. Talent is not necessarily seen by the mass. And it kind of is this way. Talent and right or functional is not always accepted by society, and that's the Aquarius critique, right?
Yeah.
It goes beyond the social construct.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like they would just both do super well in a judge room.
Yeah, yeah,
Of pointing out important things. You would want both on your team in a way.
indeed. I do agree. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think before we move on to the last point of comparing Virgo to Libra to Scorpio, we briefly want to mention the organ rulerships, because we haven't not done that, and we have done it for every sign, so it would be weird to not do it for this sign. And the organ rulership of Libra is the kidneys. And once again, it's interesting that there are two kidneys. And like the job overall is the balance and the purification of the body. And what is also very fascinating when you think of like the Libra Aries axis is that Aries rules over the adrenal glands, which are just above the kidneys. So we have a way in a connection there. And also Mars that rules over the blood, and the blood goes through the kidneys to get purified.
Yeah.
And Libra also rules over the lower back region. And because Venus Libra also rules over the veins. Sorry, I said this last sentence so weirdly.
No, it doesn't matter. It's okay.
And Venus also rules, Venus and Libra also rule over the veins and the ovaries, as well as the overall balance of the hormonal system. Again, keyword balance here.
Balance of the hormonal system. I mean, what is Venus and Mars if not Venus and Mars together, if not a bunch of hormones that make love?
In a way, it is. And I mean, like the adrenal glands are so important for like our stress levels and everything.
Yeah.
And I feel it's just so interesting how you can see like Mars being so present there, and how they're both working together with that energy. Well, I mean, with all the planets, like this is the first example where we really put the comparison together in the body parts, so you can even see it showing up in our bodies.
Yeah.
And you will see it with the rest of the signs when we also make the comparisons there. Yes, so
yeah, if we turn back to the sign comparison,
exactly.
We have to talk about the fact that there is a journey from Virgo to Libra, and then to Libra to Scorpio. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, I think Virgo comes out with this wonderful plan for making things work. And I think that Libra does a good job in gathering people that support this plan to make this plan be accepted by society. It can be, for example, Virgo could make a plan to improve something in a city, and then Libra can be the person that goes to the government and says, look at this plan, it can be functional. Do we have your support? I think that this is part of the journey from Virgo to Libra. So Libra brings the social support to a plan that was built because we also need that. And I think it's really beautiful in this way. And then with the Scorpio, it's ruled by Mars. It's way more defensive. It's more aware of the harsh reality that Libra is definitely not. And then Scorpio tries to defend what was built this far. It has more this discernment of who is trustable to share information with. I would say that this is the main journey from Virgo to Libra and then to Scorpio.
Yes. And I also feel like Virgo and Libra both kind of have a bit of the perfectionistic side towards them.
True.
Just Virgo is much more about the perfection of how they do the things, and Libra is much more about the perfection of just being like who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think generally I think it's maybe the most interesting sequence of like,
Yeah.
the like you have the virgin, which is like a human,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. And then you have the scales, and then you have the scorpion. It's like a very
Yeah.
interesting like evolution that
I,
comes
I, I do agree. Because it's like the maiden in Virgo, it's more like, let's get ready to meet to meet what is not light, the darkness, right? What is, let's have a plan, let's be ready. It's all about being ready, the Virgo sign. And then
yeah.
Libra, it's more scale, it's more related to thinking and evaluating. It's as if when you write a school paper that you have to submit, while you're writing it, it's the Virgo part, and before submitting it, it's maybe the Libra part, which is trying to evaluate with the intellect if everything is okay, you know? And it's kind of like both Virgo and Libra are related more to human, because human can do that. And it's not really an animal instinct, right? They are really both related to the intellect of creating something with their own mind. Virgo, of course, being more connected to the practical process of creating things, and Libra being more about evaluating what the human has done. And then Scorpio is more the animal brain. It's more the animal brain saying, okay, but this is precious. We have to protect it somewhat. Um, so it's I would say an implementation of awareness of human danger that exists, and it's also an implementation of the awareness of the potency of what the human mind can create. And what is potent, must be somewhat preserved carefully. And I think
Yes.
that this is why we have this succession sign. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so much also about the journey to the underworld.
Yeah.
And then Scorpio is the underworld. Like
Yeah,
we
Scorpio
get
is
there because
it's the darkest.
yeah, because Sagittarius is obviously not the underworld.
No, I know,
Um,
definitely not.
so that's and you have that too. Like in Virgo, you really have the preparation, and Libra it kind of it starts but it stagnates, and then in Scorpio you're like officially like, hey,
There.
welcome, like we're here now. We are here now.
We're here now. Watch your ass.
Exactly. And yeah, and that's really what we're going to cover in the next episode,
Yeah, I'm
which
so excited.
I think we are both excited
Ooh.
about. We both have a lot of Scorpio placements.
My Scorpio
So,
stallion is screaming.
and it's gonna start soon. I mean, Mars already entered its home sign, and the sun is going there soon. So, yes, I
Yeah,
think we're excited to create and make the next episode.
yes, I do agree. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to our podcast. It was really fun to make it. So let's see each other to the Scorpio episode. Bye.
Bye.